Hello and welcome to week 5 of my guide to the best 100 artists of all time, in my opinion. There was a question on Quora recently. What are the total number of artists on Spotify? The answer given was 2 million. I've no idea whether this is exactly accurate or up to date, but it's certainly plausible. Yet, despite the vast number of different artists we could choose to listen to, I suspect most of you, if you chose your top 100 groups of all time, would have some groups in common with me, even though you might well be screaming at the screen because you think some of my selections are, to put it politely, rubbish. Most of the groups I have chosen, you've probably heard of, but there's a handful of groups you've probably not heard of. And the first of these groups is today's selection, American Aquarium. I heard American Aquarium by chance because Ian, the manager of my favourite cafe before COVID shut it down, Ian bumped into American Aquarium when he was at an Americana festival in Nashville, and he insisted on playing them in the cafe. Quite often I didn't like the records Ian played in the cafe. He has different tastes to me, but with American Aquarium he hit pay dirt. This time I was hooked. American Aquarium are essentially a country and western band, but certainly at the rockier end of country and western. People who know more about country music than me tell me it's called alt country. It certainly has much more slide guitar than I'm used to, almost blues-like. Another feature of American Aquarium's music is the brutal honesty of the lyrics, as the lead singer and main man in the group, B.J. Barnum, details his various struggles with wine, women and song, i.e. alcohol addiction, unfaithful women, and the shortcomings of rock and roll as a sensible career choice. He formed the band quite some time ago, in 2006 in North Carolina, and the band name was derived from the first line of the first song on Wilco's classic album, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. Some groups consist of 4 or 5 equal members, but I think it's fair to say that American Aquarium are B.J. Barnum and 4 or 5 other accomplished musicians. Barnum founded the group, he writes the songs, he plays guitar and he sings, and since forming the band he's gone through 26 other members. In the main, this is because of the economic reality of being in a band called like American Aquarium. It's a full-time commitment, but it's not yet made a lot of money for anybody. They have played apparently over 3,000 gigs before this horrible year, 2020. They were doing 250 gigs a year, making just about enough money to scrape a living, but the song lyrics talk and struggle. They weren't always making a good living. I feel privileged because I've seen them twice in a pub in Manchester, but when you've flown across the Atlantic Ocean, selling 50 tickets, which only cost £10 each, can't be commercially viable. They are, of course, more successful in their native America and the native USA, but not massively so. The first album was in 2005, but it's just not happened for them yet. In 2012, on one of the songs on my playlist called Casualties, they sang I should have been a doctor or a lawyer or a policeman on patrol instead. And I can't do justice to the way B.J. Barnum delivers it. Instead, I'm a casualty of rock and roll. The band, around about the time this record came out, it was Casualty Rock and Roll was on their album Burn Flicker Die. The band were talking about calling it a day, giving up, this being their last album. Of course, just as they were planning to call it a day, this album, without ever making loads of money, was more successful than there had been. It just successful enough to give them renewed hope. It was produced by Jason Isbell, who was a relatively well-known musician and producer, courtesy of his work in the Drive-By Truckers. The band became commercially viable with this album. Nonetheless, when it came to doing the Wolves album in 2015, an album about animals, not about Midland football team of dubious reputation, they relied on Kickstarter to fund it. But despite their commercial struggles, it was still a shot when in 2017, as catalogued by a series of social media posts, the band actually imploded. Barham was left without any other band members at all. They all left as one. Undeterred, BJ quickly put a new band together, got a new record contract, and the resulting album in 2018, Things Change, became their most successful and critically acclaimed album to date. A lot, most in fact, of BJ Barham's best songs had resulted from trauma and bitterness. A song I particularly love, I Hope He Breaks Your Heart, was a very bitter diatribe against an ex-girlfriend. He's clearly, though, in a much better, happier place now. He's got a stable relationship, a solid family, a kid. Great news for BJ Barham, of course, but selfish fans like me worried, would the records lose their edge? No, they haven't, and perhaps for once in our lives we can thank President Trump, because with Trump in power, on his last two albums, Barham has still found plenty to be angry about outside of his own life. He tries not to preach at us too much, but as he said, I'd be doing myself and the listener a huge disservice if I didn't talk about things I see, which is a country divided. He does, however, try to see things from both points of view. He tells stories rather than deliver one-sided rants. He shows no sign of giving up on rock and roll just yet. I wrote this just before lockdown. At the same time, Barham was writing a new album just before lockdown kicked in. Lamentations came out during lockdown, and it's another comment on the times. Perhaps one day they will make the career of it that they deserve to, but now I'm just so glad that I can see BJ Barham and American Aquarium in intimate venues rather than from the back of an arena. Listen to the playlist, and if you get the chance, go and see American Aquarium live. Next week, by coincidence, it's another obscure band. Not quite as obscure. If you're a fan of modern prog rock music, you probably will have just about have heard of next week's band, an up-and-coming band from Liverpool, or at least they were an up-and-coming band until 2 weeks ago. Stay tuned, find out more next week.